Hi, and welcome to Morning Coffee with Kazan Academy. I'm Deanna, and it's Great Books Monday. It is also National Poetry Month, so I thought I would talk about why poetry is important and use some of my favorite poets, the Lake Poets, as examples. So the Lake Poets are named the Lake Poets because they lived near the Lake District in England. And they are part of the Romantic movement of poetry. This occurred in the late 1700s and early 1800s. Now, William Wordsworth was born in 1770, and he is the first Lake poet and is very prominent. In fact, he collaborated with Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who was born in 1772 and is also considered to be one of the Lake poets, but one of the great Romantic poets from England as well, right up there with Lord Byron. And then Richard Southey was born in 1704, and he met Coleridge and then ended up moving up to the Lake District where he met William Wordsworth as well. And the three would write and collaborate together, particularly Wordsworth and Coleridge, who collaborated on one of the greatest pieces of Romantic poetry, and that is the lyrical ballads. So I have been a fan of poetry as long as I can remember. When I was a kid, we had to memorize poetry in school. I always had books of poetry around. I just really enjoyed it. But I know most people don't. A lot of the reason, I think, is because it's a little more abstract. Things are written in metaphor and it's very lyrical. And I think people nowadays just think that it's something that only special people can understand, like people that are well-versed in English literature or who teach at a college, but we don't really see the usefulness of poetry. But that isn't the case. Poetry is extraordinarily useful. For instance, for kids, by memorizing poems and reading poetry from an early age, this helps with their vocabulary. They learn new words and they learn meanings of words, and they can also learn how words can mean different things in different contexts. It helps with developmental learning. So the idea of rhyme and rhythm, and this is why poems were repeated orally, as poems as long as the Iliad from Homer could be recited by memory, is because of the way that they were written, with rhyming and with a particular cadence. This helps kids with speech. And so from really early on, when they're starting to speak more through their later toddler years into the kindergarten years, having them learn some shorter, easier poems with words that they can understand can really help in this developmental stage. Reading poetry as well as writing poetry for your kids can help with developing skills. They can learn about language, they can learn words, and particularly if they are writing rhyming poems, they're going to have to find a word that rhymes that makes sense to what they're trying to say, and this can really expand their vocabulary. Reading and writing poetry exposes you to new ideas, to new ways of thinking, different ways of looking at the world and seeing the world. And it's not always just this flowery language. There are poems that can really help you experience things and feel things. So if you're a teenager or an adult and you're going through something, but you can't really articulate it and understand it, poets have probably written about it. And so by reading poetry and self-reflecting and trying to understand can actually be quite insightful and therapeutic for the reader. These are just a few reasons of why poetry should be integrated into the life of children and middle school and high school students as well as adults, because it allows us to see the world more completely, to introspect, understand some of our own feelings that may be a little abstract for us to even understand in our own mind. And so the Lake Poets are a great introduction, particularly for high school or adults, because they're just absolutely beautiful. They're some of the best verse written in the English language. And in the Romantic period, there's this transition to really being focused on the individual and what the individual is experiencing and seeing. And so not only do we get insight to that time period and what was going on around them in the world, we can also see some introspection that could help us in our own lives. So let's take William Wordsworth. His poems encompass the life that he lived at Cambridge University, what it was like as a college student, what he was feeling, some of this angst and some of this trepidation, the sort of ups and downs. And that can be really insightful if you have a college student or if you are a college student, in helping you understand what you're going through. And a lot of times it's nice to know that we're not the only ones going through things, that there are other people that have felt these same emotions that we have felt. In the preface to Lyrical Ballads that William Wordsworth wrote, he describes poetry. He says, quote, "In spite of difference of soil and climate, of language and manners, of laws and customs, in spite of things silently gone out of mind and things violently destroyed, the poet binds together by passion and knowledge the vast empire of human society, as it is spread over the whole earth and over all time. The objects of the poet's thoughts are everywhere, through the eyes and senses of man are. It is true, his favorite guides, yet he will follow wheresoever he can find an atmosphere of sensation in which to move his wings. Poetry is the first and last of all knowledge. It is immortal in the heart of man." I think he expresses it very well. Poetry captures everything through space and time. The earliest writings we have from the ancient Greeks were poems. And so poetry is something that I personally think should be integrated into a child's learning and be something that we can use as adults when we just need a little bit of time to introspect or just kind of get away from the world. I hope you go seek out some poetry to share with your family. If you're enjoying our videos, please like them, share with your friends, subscribe to our channel. We have links to our other social media in the description below. I'm off to go read some poetry, and I hope you do the same. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.